on nutrition, because at the end of the day, food is the foundation of health. So we need to make sure that we go back to our basics and eat a really good diet in order to avoid having problems as you get older, or different conditions like heart disease and cancer and so on. So the goal is really to get back to a good, fresh, healthy diet. And one of the things that I hear a lot that people ask me a lot is about gluten-free. I'm sure you guys are really familiar with this. For the last, I would say, 10 years, we've had a lot more talks about gluten-free foods and everything about avoiding gluten and wheat and so on and so on. So is that a real thing, or does it make sense? So I know from a clinical point of view, I would say that about 10% of people that I see do have some sort of gluten sensitivity. 90% of people don't really have gluten issues. The most famous one, or the most known one, is celiac disease, right? This is more like an allergic type of reactions. Over time, in the past, people would die from that. They will bleed internally and they will actually die. But today, we know how to treat celiac. It's to actually avoid gluten, okay? So gluten-free, yes, it is something, but maybe not for everybody. I don't know. So most of my clients actually avoid gluten for some time. I would say that 100% of my clients avoid wheat at some degree. They may not have an issue with gluten, but sometimes they have an issue with other protein in the wheat. So the wheat that we eat today is just not the same type of grain that we used to eat, like in the Bible time, for example. Okay, the wheat is totally different. So the wheat that we have today has a lot more gluten. This is one of the reasons why people develop sensitivities or problems with gluten, is the content of the wheat is much higher what we use, or what the body used to process. So that's an issue as well. And the other issue that I see quite a bit, which is the main cause of gluten problems, is pesticides, Roundup. Okay, we know today that most people who have issues with gluten or wheat is because of the Roundup that is sprayed on those grains. So in average, in this country, wheat grains are stored in a warehouse somewhere about 4 years before they are actually used for food and different things. So if you can imagine 4 years sitting somewhere, you have to use some type of chemicals, pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, insecticides, all those chemicals to actually make sure that the grains don't go bad. So they spray a lot of chemicals on the wheat, actually. And of course, the chemicals in the wheat end up into our GI tract, end up into our bodies. And when that happens, this is when you start having problems, is the gut is actually destroyed by the pesticides, and then you have leaky gut, and then you have gluten sensitivity, and you have all kind of reactions to different foods. So at the end of the day, most of the leaky gut going on, it's caused by the pesticide load that we consume from our food. There's other factors, but this is the main one. Okay, to get back to my point, is gluten-free a thing or not? It is, if the gut is damaged. Okay, if the gut is not happy, if there's pesticide in the gut, leaky gut, you will have to avoid gluten or wheat for some time in order to reverse the gut problems and help healing the gut lining, so you don't have reactions anymore. This is something that we do all the time with functional medicine, is we restore what's damaged, we detox the body of all those different things, and then we fix the gut. So we do that, and then the body doesn't react anymore to foods. Okay, it could be all kind of foods, but here we talk about gluten. So gluten is a really harsh protein to digest if you have gut problems. Okay, so I would say that about 80-90% of people that I know of will have some type of wheat sensitivities, not necessarily gluten, because there's hundreds of proteins in wheat, right? So gluten is just one. So I would say about, like I said, 10% of people will have gluten sensitivities, but 80-90% of people will have some type of wheat sensitivities. The goal is to avoid eating, consuming that kind of wheat, the wheat that is processed, the wheat that we find in this country, that is toxic for you because of the pesticide, the content of gluten, the content of different protein, and so on and so on. So gluten-free is a thing for a lot of people, actually, and a lot of people that I see when they start doing the gluten-free food diet, they automatically start feeling better because they stop poisoning the body of gluten. Gluten is really hard process, and it has a lot of side effects. It could be neurological, it could be affecting your moods, your hormone, insomnia. It can affect your liver, causing a fatty liver, for example. It can impact detox. It can lead to neuropathy. There's many symptoms of gluten sensitivities, and most people do not have GI symptoms. They have all other symptoms. Brain fog is a common one as well. So it is important to look at if you're gluten sensitive or not. As a matter of fact, I had this patient, this really young patient, about 6 years old, and the mom came to us because she didn't know what to do with him. He couldn't stand at school. The school principals were involved, the teacher, the CPS got involved. The little boy was so ADD, was all over the place. He was mean. He wasn't happy. He was just not himself. And he had a gluten sensitivity. So when we discovered that, so we recommended a gluten-free diet. Within a few weeks, he got back to normal. I mean, he totally changed. Today, the little boy is so happy. He's in a good mood. He has friends. He's social. He's not ADD anymore, so he's good at school. So gluten can have major impacts on the body if your body is really sensitive to it. The problem with gluten-free foods is most of the time they replace gluten by other things. Most of the time they use sugar to replace the gluten. They use other starches, potatoes, tapioca, rice, all those other grains. Oftentimes, what people don't realize when they go with gluten-free foods, they tend to eat more sugar because of it. And I've seen people getting weight and actually getting worse in time because they replace all of those gluten foods, but like gluten-free, thinking that they were better, but they were consuming more sugar and more starches and more preservatives and more chemicals. So it's not necessarily good. I typically recommend a paleo type of diet. So don't eat the wheat, don't eat processed food. So the goal is to go to a good, fresh food type of diet. So if you don't eat processed foods, frozen food, you avoid all the chemicals, all the preservatives, all those dyes, all the junk, the sugar, and you just feel better. So that's something to consider. If you do gluten-free foods and you don't feel better, most likely is because the food that you use to replace those wheat foods are not healthy for you. Your body reacts. As a matter of fact, 50% of people who have gluten or wheat sensitivity do have an issue with corn. And a lot of those products, they use corn. And then people don't realize that corn, it is a major issue in a lot of people. Like I said, 50% of people, the corn that we have today is processed, GMO, pesticide, and so on and so on. So it's not the actual original corn that we use to consume, for example. So one of the major side effects or symptoms that I see from a gluten sensitivity is anemia. So if you suffer from anemia or you've been anemic for some time and you are still anemic despite taking iron, or you need to take iron in order for you to not be anemic, so that's most likely a gluten issue. And I see that in all cases is when people come in, they have anemia, cut out the wheat, anemia is handled, is gone. Like I said, because the wheat, the gluten impact, destroy the gut lining, and the body is not able to absorb minerals from the food or vitamins that people take. So there's pros and cons to gluten-free food. One is you actually avoid gluten, which is a toxin for the body. On the other side, a lot of people go with gluten-free options, gluten-free desserts and gluten-free pasta and pizza and so on and so on. And typically those foods have more sugar and they use other starches that can actually damage your body and cause inflammation in the body. So something to consider what you need to do. We don't need grains at the end of the day to survive. I know it sounds crazy, but I've been myself doing paleo for more than 10 years and I'm healthier than ever, actually. So I get all my minerals, my vitamins from animal products, from vegetables, from fruits, from nuts, and that's good enough. So most of the grains that we find in this country is highly processed. Things will be much different if you were in other countries like in France or Italy. They still have a good quality wheat products, actually. And I have several of my patients, when they go there, when they travel to France, for example, they enjoy a French baguette or they enjoy pasta and they don't feel bad. They feel good, actually, because they have a non-processed, healthy wheat over there. So it all depends about the quality of the grains that you get. That's why I do recommend to avoid grains as much as possible if you live in the States in order to minimize those toxins. Okay. I hope it makes sense. If you have any questions, you can let me know. You can write a comment. Thank you for watching.